mataki api. Okay, Elijah Hopkins dim, yeah. This is Elijah Hopkins again. We're having another episode of our land-based learning project podcast series. Again, I got Tahashi Jeremy Redigo is in the house. He's in studio here in my office here, and so we wanted to again share some things about the land, at least as we understand it. And the last time we visited, we talked a little bit about gathering plants, medicine herbs, medicinal foods, and whatnot. And there's a time and season for those things. And gee, we really went all over the place, had a good conversation, covered a lot of bases. But I think that's how these things go sometimes because everything's connected, right? With the land. And I think that's a healthy perspective to have. We don't have to have like a linear academic PowerPoint presentation. We want to just make this in a good Dakota way. We're just everywhere, all over the map. But I think there's it keeps us thinking like holistically. And I think that's healthy. And so I think as I reflect back on our last conversation, Tahashi, we talked about preparation, and there's different sayings in our language. One is I heard ohinni, winyeya, manke. And then the Lakotas have another one. I don't know. You know more probably about that one. If you want to share that, but like anything you want to share about preparation, because you had a lot of like cool. I always like listen to your stories about Kushi Phyllis Red Day about you don't wait till we're being attacked to start making your bow or to learn about bow wood. We want to do that way early, man. And I think that philosophy is important. There's another Unkdo story about where Unkdo was sitting one day and his brother-in-law came to get him. He says, "Time to go." And I don't know if they were going to go on a war party or go hunting, but Unkdo, he's in a rush, man. He's always doing things to Chingchi, kind of crazy guy. And so he loads up on this horse with his brother-in-law, and they go off. And Chun here, he forgot his chehanaka, his breechcloth. So he's just kind of like stories like that. And I think they're meant to be humorous, but they're also meant to be educational in the sense that you need to be ready. And I think Ehana, especially our men, the stories that I glean for that is that there's a duty and responsibility, and there's a set of ethics tied to being a Dakota Wichashta, no Nakota Wichashta, that says that we have a value system, but we also at its very core root level, there's to call yourself a Wichashta means that you are mature, you are prepared. And I think taking that type of mentality and applying it to land-based learning, I think is essential. And so when we're prepared, that means that we don't have to take 5, 10 minutes every morning to find our chehanaka, or our itazipe is ready, So what do you think? How can we apply that to plants, land-based learning? Any stories that you want to share, Tahashi?
Yeah, I think I was just reading this thing the other day, and it was a quote from Bruce Lee. I don't know if it was made up or if he really said this or not, but he was talking about being reactive. And when I was younger, I was reactive because of how I was raised, and you know, anger, all of these things because of the disconnect to my life, the dysfunction. So these are things that I'm passionate about learning about today, about how our Dakota people did these things specifically with young men, how there was a code of ethics, there was a way that you were supposed to conduct yourself. But he talked about being reactive, that um, when you react to things, like if somebody comes up to you and starts saying stuff to you, or, being hurtful, saying negative things, if you react to that, he says, if you're reactive, then you are easily manipulated. So learning to remain in control of your emotions and to not feed into those things. And that was how our warriors that, had to be conditioned in that way. Even though they were the most fierce warriors to walk the face of the earth, they also were humble men, and they carried themselves in a way they didn't react to stuff. So anyways, I think about that with the current situation that we're living in, whether we're talking about climate change, whether we're talking about the Trump administration or whatever it is, are we going to be reactive or are we going to be proactive? And so we're at this crucial point in the history of the world where we have to be proactive as Dakota people, as Native Indigenous people. And that proactive is educating our own youth, breaking away from these Western institutions that, we've been indoctrinated into. And that doesn't mean overnight. That doesn't mean, leave and, give it all up tomorrow morning, but that we have to be progressively working towards reclaiming these things that are ours. And so when we think about climate change, I think that there's the extreme in the Washichu world, there's two extremes. One of them is denial, that it's a false thing, it's not real. And then the other is doomsday preppers. They're going to build a bunker and they're going to take $100,000 and create themselves a place where they can live if an atomic bomb is dropped or whatever. And for us, that's not a reality, neither one of those, that it's somewhere in between, and that we must be prepared. We must know, I was just talking with my wife earlier because she was talking about how her auntie last night out in Fort Kipp, she went out to go visit her, and her auntie was telling her how growing up her whole life, they drink water straight from the river. They would strain it, they would do certain things to it, but that they drank the water right out of the river. And I said, yeah, I remember Henry Wilbur down in Crow telling me that. He said that he grew up his whole life drinking water right out of that Bighorn River. And then just, this was probably about 14 years ago, just a few years prior to him telling me this, he said he got violently sick. He got deathly ill from drinking that water. He goes, but I drank it my entire life. So then I was just thinking, like, how do we take care of water? Where's our access to the water? Like if everything was to like disappear as far as, all of the modern things that we have, the conveniences. So how do we find the water? How do we get the water? And then how do we clean that water? How do we know that that water is safe to drink? So when first of all, I believe when it comes to climate change is that we want to blame. We want to blame the government. We want to blame political people. We want to blame corporations. We want to blame oil companies. And there is definitely a blame to be had on those individuals. But if we ourselves as a people and as individuals, if we do not hold ourselves accountable to our everyday actions that contribute to climate change, how can we hold anybody else accountable to that? Because as consumers, we're the ones that feed that machine. So I think that that's the first step, is looking at your own self and being like, what do I do to contribute to these things? What can I do to offset that? What can I do to have a clean conscience with the life that I'm living? And so a big part of that is the convenience and starting to do away with those conveniences, whether it's the food, eating easily made meals, fast food, whatever it is. I always say if our land is sick, our body is sick, our language is sick, all of these things, because dogwas ichikwak, all of those things are connected. And so we have to start combating each one individually, even though they're all connected. So start by replacing your diet, growing your own food, harvesting and foraging your own food, hunting your own food, and bartering with other people that are like-minded and doing the same thing. If you go to the store to purchase food, where is that food coming from? Invest in stuff that you can prepare, that you take time and energy, because there's the spiritual side of it too, the love and the things that you put into your cooking or whatever it is, then the language, we're taking care of that language. We're using it in a good way. We're bringing this back. And then the land, we're connected to that, and we're doing things that are going to benefit the land. And so as you do these things, you are slowly putting away those conveniences. You're slowly starting to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, learning to embrace the cold. When it gets cold outside, go for a walk, do activities outside to, you know, uh, be comfortable with it. I remember Ojibwe guy telling me one time when he was a little kid, he said, yeah, my mom, 1 week every summer, she would shut the water and the power off in the house. And we would have to, for 1 week, experience what it's like to not have those conveniences. And I think that's really important, that we raise our children in a way um, where they can learn to embrace those things. I know my kids get tired of living in the country sometime, but they know how to start a fire. They know how to do these things because I make sure that they know those things. Even if they had their way, they would probably never learn those things. But it's my responsibility to teach them and raise them to know how to do that stuff. And so as we move forward through, this world that we're living into today is how are we going to embrace those things? How are we going to challenge ourselves? The conversation we had yesterday at the Buffalo Roundtable is how do we reintroduce wild meat into our families if our children, if our partners, or if other family members are not used to that and their palate isn't used to
We lie
eating
to them,
those
we don't tell them.
Yeah, we lie to them, put lots of ketchup on it. But that is a reality too that we have to sometimes do that. But it's slowly, so my wife will take, because me, I'll eat whatever, I don't care. But she has to doctor that wild game. She has to doctor it up. She has to do certain seasonings and things, and that's fine, He says, but that's the start, because then you're slowly reintroducing it, you know, back into your palate, back into your body, even not just the palate, but those things can affect your body at first if you're not used to it. It says, a long time ago, they have stories where, meat, like you could, we were talking about the dried meat and how they say, like, you can't, our people just dry it. They don't put salt. They don't do any of that stuff. And non-natives would, question that. But our bodies can become used to eating things that we normally aren't used to today. The raw organs, the kidney and all of that kind of stuff, and raw liver things. But if your bodies aren't used to that, then it can be difficult on you. So let's start taking those small steps. And so not only is it just reconnecting with your identity as an Indigenous person, but it's things that you're going to rely on those things if the grocery stores close, if we have another pandemic, or we have, who knows, because I think anybody will agree that in this day and age in the country we're living in right now today, that we are so vulnerable and anything can happen. And our reservations can be a they can be a place where we can take advantage of the things, even though we may live, surrounded with poverty and all of these other social ailments that may exist within our communities. We also have gifts, not just with the knowledge and stuff, but with our rights, with the land, with things that we have more freedom than maybe what the non-native people may have out there. They have advantages when it comes to money and all of these things that, laws and stuff that they can influence. But when it really truly comes down to it, a lot of our tribes, not all of them, but a lot of them, they protect the natural resources. We still have the ability to at least live off the land to some degree, So those are things that I think we need to start thinking about.
Yeah, I know sometimes we're trying to figure out how to get, I guess, get out of my office being stationary and static. So sometimes I try to get back out. And so I used to do construction work, did maintenance with my father for a year or two. And then just growing up in sports and whatnot, I was always doing something. But then you go through college education systems and you get these jobs. And I think what's connected to those things is sedentary lifestyle and convenience eating and all this stuff. And so I've been guilty of that myself. And so I've, over the last few years, been actively trying to get back into just being more active and whatnot. So because I'm a consumer too, guilty of that to a degree, social media and whatnot, I'll see Washichu guys and doing cold plunges, jumping into this big barrel of ice water. But and when I was watching these guys do that, it reminded me of things our people did. I think there's truth to what they're doing. I think they're probably taking it in a different way and but our people, when they would do our inikacha and they come out and they sweat lodges, and they would purposely usually set them right by rivers or streams. And I remember the first ones I ever went to outside of Billings down in Crow Country. My dad had a Hunka relative. We went down there and we would sweat. And I remember coming out, and that was the thing. You just operate in the old river, man, and it shocks your system. So you go from one extreme to the next, but there must be some type of there's again, a spiritual reason. There's probably just a natural reason. One, the natural is probably to close your pores and to kind of clean off everything that comes out, of your body. And then it wakes you up because when you're come out in extreme heat like that, you're kind of foggy, but it wakes you up real quick. And I think there's probably like some spiritual reasons to that I don't fully understand, but there's a practical reason that we would do that. And I don't really see those things happening up here as much, but I do know I used to go to some sweats over kind of south of Oswego, and they used to do that back in the day. I first started going to some sweats and jump right into the old Missouri. That was a thing. But um, I was thinking about that when you were talking about things that we can do that are within our means to do things like that. And about a month ago, I had a couple elderly gentlemen that were in my office. We were doing a recording, and they were talking about different things, and how I really look up to older people like that. The older I get, because they just carry a lot of like wisdom and knowledge, even though they're not the most techie people, and they're people and they have faults. I have a lot of respect for like older people that can still get together in their form of okodakichi, of like their friendship. There's a value to that because you can tell people get too isolated. They don't think right, and they kind of yokushiche, like that because we're all people, and sometimes we can get negative sometimes, and so it's good to see. I think people get together and visit and talk, and I think our bodies have a natural reaction to socializing in our more normal ways of through the language and culture, just part of who we are and sharing different things. And I think connecting with the land, it's in our DNA to do those things. And we talked about this earlier, other I guess episodes, when we were talking about that's the benefit, the power of the land. It comes through us, through our feet and our bodies. Because I know when I've gone on hikes and hunt for elk, and we're out and about, we're connected to the land. It wakes up who we are, and I think that's normal. We shouldn't be afraid of it. We also have to be smart about it. Some of these guys really go way back in that back country, get chased around by grizzly bears. But I think there's little subtle things that we can do that I think are attainable. And so part of land-based learning, some of these workshops that we're trying to model and replicate for people, is to create access. But even platforms like this is just create awareness on how that's important. And part of our moving forward is that we all have some type of connection to technology and probably consumerism. But now is the time to start, I guess, being reflective on what you're doing. And I think that's going to be a key component to our overall health. When I was listening to Tanshi talk earlier, that I think that's important, because we all have family and relatives that are at various levels of political ideology and their own value systems and whatnot. And so I think modeling it yourself is the main thing, and then trying to influence our kids to do more things, whether even simple things as fishing, and want to challenge yourself to kind of learn new things. Um, so yeah, Tahashi, is there anything else you want to cover here before we close her down in the next 5-10 minutes?
Yeah, it was just myself. I gave up. I haven't had I'm proud to say this. I haven't had a 40-hour week job in 3.5 years. And for me, it's pushing back against that capitalism and that consumer lifestyle. And my son was going through a transition at work, and he was kind of concerned financially. And I just had to remind him, I said, it's okay to be hungry every once in a while. It keeps you on your toes. We need to be secure in our lives, that we can't just do things any old way and have our children and grandchildren or whoever, paying a price for that and being irresponsible. But we can push back against the system and still have a good life. And changing when I did this, my wife and I went to school in New Mexico for 3 years. And like the last time we were down there, that semester was really difficult. And it was just us because our kids had stayed home with our older kids. And so we were down there by ourselves, and we were really poor. We had our bills taken care of. We were responsible in all those aspects, but we had to get creative of the food that we were eating and all of the, the activities stuff, because we had no extra money. And it keeps you on your toes. And our people were like that they would encounter these things, even though they were always proactive, they were always prepared and doing things. You deal with stuff in life. And what happens when we work a 40-hour week job, when we have a consistent paycheck and we have retirement, we have all of these things, we get comfortable, we get complacent. And I just challenge people that you can still like have a foundation that, like you don't ever want to lose your home, especially in this world, in this day and age. But we can do things to where shake it up a little bit in your life, man. Move things around, do stuff to where you have to challenge yourself to break out of that consistency and that everyday mundane things, and using your time instead of going on vacation, go take your kids out into the wilderness or out on the land and challenge yourself to do something that you're normally not used to doing.
Mm. One of the things I've always thought about was, I don't mean to jump all over the place either here, but pre-contact. Here in Fort Peck, we have so many different bands represented, and I think sometimes we get younger people, but they might not understand where not all these bands are always here. At like one point, we were woodland people, and we've all kind of had different like migratory times that we came further and further out on the plains, is explained to me. But part of our language is connected to that, and the old style of Isanti Dakota house structure wasn't always just a teepee, right? We had, and I forget, they were like probably the original OG Wakea tents, right? Like, but they were made out of wood, and then it was almost like elevated off the ground a little bit, and they were, I don't know the Dakota words for those, but those were our homes, and then there's versions of that. When you look at even coming out on the plains, there were Mandan Hadats had these earth lodges, and our Dakota people get farther east, see these mounds everywhere. I've always been interested about that. That there's probably a whole different discussion on that. You go farther down to Mississippi, all over. But I know Tashi over in Sisseton, by Tokonua, that little community over there. There's a lady and a relative over there that on their land they have this earth lodges. Is that what they're called? And then maybe next time, kind of running short on time here, maybe we could talk about that a little bit, because I think that's such a cool way to push back against the system. We're talking about pushing back a little bit. But I also think it's interesting, last time I talked to you about these modern earth lodges, how they're vacant, can't even get people to live in them. So that's interesting to me. I mean, not in a good way, but it's good in the sense that to delve deeper into why, if there's almost a free or a low cost earth lodge modern home. When I say modern, isn't it, but I have all the aspects of maybe modern living, but it's a livable house right next to a pristine lake, but yet, Chun, it's empty. You know why? It's, I think, and I think we kind of know why, but it'd be interested in maybe talk about that, but also the benefits of an earth lodge, maybe kind of the backstory a little bit on why that was even a thing, because how cool would that be down the road if you're in Fort Peck, there was some earth lodges, man, and you could have and that's a practical way to fight back against climate change, and we're not building these stick homes, and that aren't really energy efficient, and it's like those are things that I think are realistic that our people could do, and it's a cool way to bridge modern I guess methods of building with our ancestral like ways of living, and making that work for us. And I think that's kind of what I'm hoping our land-based learning project can talk about things like that.
Exactly. Let's take our traditional knowledge and let's take the knowledge of the modern world, technology, and let's create something amazing for our future, because we have the ability to do it.
Heck yeah, because there's a term when I was visiting these elders here, they were kind of teasing each other a little bit. And one of them, I said, "Kaspa with Chasha Henicha." He was teasing this other guy because And in any Indian community, you've always heard that term. Oh, he's an apple. Apple. He's red on the outside, one, and some people might take that as derogatory, but in a teasing way, I think if we're combining Western knowledge or traditional knowledge and like modern way, that's a good thing. And we want to like encourage that, and it's gonna look different probably for different people, but maybe next time we can talk about that a little bit more, Tosh.